Okay, picture this. You're scrolling through your feed and you see your favorite activist live streaming,
Mm.
but something feels off. Their message is a little different and their lips don't quite sync with their words.
hmm
It's subtle, but your gut is just screaming at you something's wrong.
That unsettling feeling you're experiencing, that could be your internal alarm bells warning you about a mimetic mimic. These are essentially AI-powered clones, sophisticated deepfakes, even coordinated troll farms all working together to spread disinformation.
Whoa, okay, that's intense. So we're not just talking about some random troll in their mom's basement, right? This is something much more organized. This is intentional.
Absolutely. Think state-backed operations with serious resources. They're using cutting-edge AI to infiltrate and manipulate online conversations. It's like a digital puppet show, but with incredibly high stakes.
Okay, this is starting to feel like something straight out of a sci-fi thriller, but let's break it down for our influence decoders. Can you give us a real-world example of these mimetic mimics in action?
Think back to the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. Researchers uncovered Russian troll farms creating fake accounts that were almost indistinguishable from those of actual black activists. These accounts were then used to spread divisive messages designed to incite violence and undermine the movement from within.
That's chilling. It's like they're weaponizing our trust in familiar voices and aesthetics. It really makes you realize how easily misinformation can spread under the guise of authenticity.
Precisely. And as AI technology advances, so do these mimics. We've progressed beyond text-based accounts to incredibly realistic deepfakes. Remember that fake Greta Thunberg video endorsing eco-terrorism that went viral on TikTok? That's a prime example of AI being used to create these synthetic personas.
Yeah, it's unsettling to think that anyone can be convincingly mimicked online. How can we even trust what we see and hear anymore?
That's the real danger here. We're not just talking about online manipulation. These mimetic mimics have real-world consequences.
Okay, so this isn't just about online drama or petty arguments. This is about actions that have a tangible impact on the real world. Give us an example of how this online manipulation spills over into real life.
Take the 2017 Kenyan election. AI-generated voice notes were circulated on WhatsApp, purportedly from opposition leaders confessing to crimes. These deepfakes were so convincing, they sparked widespread violence and unrest.
It's scary to think that something entirely fabricated can escalate into real-world chaos so quickly. Are there any examples closer to home?
Definitely. Remember that AI-generated image of a Pentagon explosion that went viral last year? It looks so real that it caused a temporary dip in the stock market, wiping out millions in value. It wasn't just about spreading fear or chaos. It was a calculated move to manipulate financial markets.
Wow, so it's not just about sowing discord and division anymore. It's about manipulating markets, influencing elections, and even inciting violence. What's the ultimate goal of all of this?
Ultimately, these mimetic mimics aim to erode trust in information itself. The more we encounter them, the more we start to question everything we see and hear. They're trying to create a world where everything feels synthetic and truth is impossible to discern.
So it's like they're trying to engineer a mass gaslighting, making us doubt our own senses and the information we rely on. But how are they so effective? What makes these mimics so good at spreading their message?
It comes down to psychology. Mimetic mimics exploit our inherent tribal instincts and our need to belong, and our need to trust those who seem to share our values. They mimic the aesthetics and language of specific groups to build trust and slip in their harmful content.
So they're basically camouflaging themselves within online communities,
Yeah.
making their message seem more palatable to a specific audience. That's incredibly insidious.
Precisely. And they often use a tactic I call the sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Think of it like this. They present ideas that almost align with a group's values, just pushing them to a slightly more extreme conclusion. This allows them to fly under the radar, gradually nudging people towards a more radical stance without triggering alarm bells.
So it's not about outright contradicting a group's beliefs, but rather subtly shifting them towards a more extreme or polarized position. It's like a Trojan horse of ideas sneaking in under the guise of familiarity.
A perfect analogy. And here's a telltale sign that can help you spot a mimetic mimic. They rarely admit mistakes, and they tend to escalate their rhetoric when challenged.
Interesting. It's like they're programmed to double down on their message, even when presented with evidence that contradicts their claims.
Yeah.
They refuse to acknowledge any flaws in their logic or admit any wrongdoing.
Exactly. Real activists and thought leaders are open to dialogue. They admit mistakes and adapt their views based on new information. Mimetic mimics, on the other hand, are driven by an agenda and will defend their position no matter what, even if it means resorting to logical fallacies and manipulation tactics.
This is fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Okay, now that we've laid the groundwork and understand how these mimetic mimics operate, let's move on to the most important part. How can we fight back? What can our listeners, our influence decoders, do to protect themselves from this synthetic influence?
The first step is always awareness. We need to be vigilant about the content we consume online and recognize that not everything is as it seems. Developing healthy skepticism and questioning the information we encounter is crucial, especially when it comes from sources we don't fully trust.
So don't just blindly accept everything you see online, even if it comes from an account that looks familiar or aligns with your beliefs. Always question. Always be critical. But how do we do that in a practical sense? What are some specific steps our listeners can take to spot these AI clones and troll farms?
There are a few key things to look out for. First, paying attention to what's called the uncanny valley. AI-generated faces and videos often have subtle glitches or imperfections that give away their synthetic nature.
Uncanny Valley. What kind of glitches are we talking about?
How do you
I need specifics.
Think unnatural blinking patterns, slightly distorted earlobes, inconsistencies in the way hair falls or moves, even the way light reflects off their skin. It can look a little similar. Freeze-framing suspicious videos often reveals these telltale signs.
Okay, so slow down. Pay attention to the details. And don't be afraid to pause and really scrutinize what you're seeing. What else should we be looking for?
Next, check the account's history. Newly created accounts that solely post divisive content or push extreme viewpoints should raise red flags. Think of it as checking the account's digital birth certificate.
So look at when the account was created, how many followers it has, and the type of content it shared in the past. If something feels off, it probably is. What about interacting with these potentially fake accounts? Is there anything we could do to determine if we're dealing with a mimic in real time?
Absolutely. Don't hesitate to demand live verification. If you're watching a live stream and something feels off, ask the host to perform a spontaneous action that would be difficult for an AI to replicate.
Oh, so something like asking them to draw a specific symbol on a piece of paper, or say a random phrase backward. Something that requires real-time thinking and action, not just pre-programmed responses.
Precisely. It's a surprisingly effective way to weed out potential deepfakes and ensure you're interacting with a real person. And speaking of tools and tactics, there are some fantastic resources available to help you become an AI forensic expert.
Love that. An AI forensic squad ready to debunk these digital deceptions. Tell us more about these resources.
We've developed a tool called the Deepware Scanner. It's a simple drag-and-drop tool that can analyze videos and images for telltale signs of AI manipulation. It's still in beta, but it's already proving to be a valuable resource for identifying deepfakes.
That sounds incredible. We'll definitely include a link to that in our show notes. What else can we use to fight back?
Don't underestimate the power of a simple reverse image search. It can help you trace the origin of images and videos to determine if they've been manipulated or taken out of context. And remember, we're all in this together. We can be far more effective at combating disinformation if we work together and share our findings.
It's like crowdsourcing truth, building a network of savvy digital citizens armed with the knowledge and tools to fight back against manipulation. Speaking of knowledge, we've been talking a lot about how to spot mimetic mimics. But I'm curious about the psychology behind it all. What makes people susceptible to this type of synthetic influence in the first place?
That's a great question. Part of it is our natural tendency to seek information confirming our existing beliefs. We're drawn to sources that reinforce our worldview, even if those sources are unreliable or biased.
So it's like we have these mental filters that screen out information, challenging our preconceived notions.
Yeah.
This in turn makes us more vulnerable to manipulation by sources that align with our biases.
Exactly. And mimetic mimics are masters at exploiting this tendency. They tailor their messages to specific audiences, using language and imagery that resonates with their target group. It's a psychological Trojan horse, disguising their message as something familiar and appealing, making it more likely to slip past our critical defenses.
And it's not just about confirming our beliefs, is it? Our emotional state also plays a huge role in how susceptible we are to manipulation.
Absolutely. When we're feeling anxious, angry, or fearful, we're far more susceptible to manipulation. In these heightened emotional states, our critical thinking abilities diminish, and we're more likely to react impulsively.
So mimetic mimics use emotionally charged language and imagery to trigger these reactions, making their message stickier and more persuasive. It's a double whammy. They exploit our biases and our emotional vulnerabilities to get their message across.
Precisely. It's this complex interplay of psychological factors that makes us vulnerable to these sophisticated forms of manipulation.
So knowing this, what can we do to protect ourselves from this emotional hijacking? How can we develop a more resilient mindset?
Awareness is key. Recognize that our emotions can be manipulated, and practice being mindful of how our emotional state might be influencing our perceptions and judgments.
So when encountering something online that triggers a strong emotional response, take a step back, breathe, and try to assess the situation objectively. Don't just react impulsively.
Exactly. And remember, a key characteristic of critical thinking is the willingness to question your own beliefs. Challenge your assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives, and be open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
It's like hitting the reset button on your mental operating system, clearing out the cobwebs of bias and preconceived notions to make room for new information and perspectives.
I like that analogy. It's about fostering a mindset of continuous learning and intellectual humility. We should aim to understand the world in all its complexity, rather than clinging to rigid beliefs that make us vulnerable to manipulation.
It sounds like cultivating this intellectual resilience is an ongoing process, a mental workout that helps us stay sharp and avoid falling prey to these tactics.
It is. But it's a worthwhile endeavor. In this age of information overload, we can't rely solely on external authorities to tell us what to think or believe. We need to develop our own internal compass, guided by reason, critical thinking, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
It's almost like becoming an information detective, tasked with sifting through the clues, identifying the red flags, and piecing together the truth.
Exactly. And this brings us to the bigger picture. What is the ultimate goal of these disinformation campaigns? What are they trying to achieve?
That's what I've been wondering this whole time. It feels like there's a larger game at play here. What's the end game?
The end game is to erode trust. Trust in institutions, trust in information, and ultimately trust in each other. They want to create a world where nothing is certain, where everything is up for debate, and where it's impossible to distinguish truth from falsehood.
It's like they're trying to inject chaos into the very fabric of society, disrupting our sense of shared reality and making us question everything we thought we knew. If we can't even agree on basic facts, how can we possibly function as a society?
Precisely. And that's the insidious brilliance of it. By creating this vacuum of authority and legitimacy, they can then fill it with their own narrative, their own version of events.
So it's a power play, a way to control the information landscape and ultimately influence the course of events to their advantage. This is some seriously scary stuff. But knowing all this, how do we as individuals even begin to fight back against something so pervasive and sophisticated?
It can feel overwhelming, absolutely. But we're not powerless. Remember, mimetic mimics exploit our vulnerabilities, our biases, our emotional triggers, and our need for certainty. By understanding these psychological mechanisms, we can start to build defenses.
Okay, so knowledge is our first line of defense.
Right.
But what else can we do? We can't just sit around and wait for the next deepfake to drop. We need to be proactive, right?
You got it. It's about taking control of our information intake and developing what I call information hygiene habits. Think of it like washing your hands for your mind.
I love that. Watching our minds. So what does good information hygiene look like in practice?
First and foremost, be mindful of your sources. Pay close attention to where you're getting your information from. Are they known for accuracy? Do they have a clear agenda or bias?
So it's not just about reading the headline or watching the video. It's about doing your due diligence. Check the publisher's reputation. See if they have a fact-checking process. And look for signs of bias or manipulation.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to diversify your information diet. Seek out multiple perspectives on a given issue, even those that might challenge your own beliefs. Think of it like cross-training for your mind, exposing yourself to different viewpoints and strengthening your critical thinking muscles.
Great analogy. And of course, we can't forget about fact-checking. There are some fantastic resources available like Snopes, PolitiFact, and factcheck.org. Use them. They're like digital truth serums, helping us separate fact from fiction.
Absolutely. These fact-checking sites are invaluable tools in our arsenal against disinformation. They do the heavy lifting for us, researching claims and providing evidence-based analysis. But beyond the tools and tactics, I think the most important thing is to trust your instincts.
Trust our gut. What do you mean by that?
If something feels off, if a story seems too good to be true, or if a source just doesn't sit right with you, trust that feeling. Our intuition is often a powerful indicator that something isn't quite right.
So we need to cultivate a healthy sense of skepticism. develop a discerning eye for potential red flags, and be willing to question what we see and hear, even if it comes from sources we might typically trust. It's about becoming more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly. In this digital age, we need to be our own information guardians, filtering out the noise and protecting ourselves from manipulation. It's a responsibility, sure, but it's also incredibly empowering. We have the power to shape our own information landscapes and create a more informed and truthful online world.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening conversation. We've gone deep into the world of memetic mimics, uncovered their insidious tactics, and explored how to combat their influence.
It's been a pleasure sharing this information with you and our listeners. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand these threats, the better equipped we are to fight back.
To our incredible influence decoders out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to continue this conversation. Share your thoughts and let us know what other digital deceptions you'd like us to investigate. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep decoding the Matrix.